Some reunions do not arrive with footsteps or voices. They begin as whispers, soft, almost imperceptible, moving quietly through ordinary days, through the spaces between breath and memory. This was how fate returned to CEO Toan and Lytudiep. Not with certainty, not with clarity, but with a gentle pull neither of them could explain.
On the surface, Toan's life seemed calm again. The countryside had wrapped him in its slow rhythms, mornings scented with damp soil, afternoons filled with the steady hum of work, evenings softened by golden light sinking behind the fields. Yet beneath that calm, something restless stirred. He could not name it. He only knew that certain moments made his chest tighten. A familiar name overheard, a woman's laughter drifting across the yard, the way the sunset sometimes felt unbearably lonely. Toan told himself it was nothing. People without memories still felt things, didn't they? The heart, after all, did not ask permission from the mind. Miles away, Lytudiep moved through her own days with practiced strength. She cooked, she smiled, she listened. Life demanded steadiness, and she gave it what it asked for. But at night, when the world finally quieted, her thoughts betrayed her. A face she could not forget, a voice she still heard in her dreams. Love, once planted deeply, did not disappear just because time passed, or because someone vanished without explanation. The absence hurt more than anger ever could. She did not know where Toan was or who he had become, but a strange certainty lived inside her. He was still alive, still breathing under the same sky. And somehow that belief guided her steps, even when logic failed her. Fate worked patiently in the background, weaving invisible threads through people and places. A photograph passed from hand to hand, a name spoken at the right moment, a quiet farm that became a temporary refuge. None of it seemed dramatic on its own, yet together they formed a path, one neither Toan nor Tu Diem could see clearly, but both were already walking. In everyday life, we often miss the moment when everything begins to change. We are busy with meals, work, small worries, yet fate does not require attention to act. It only needs time. And somewhere between forgotten memories and unforgotten love, between silence and hope, CEO Toan and Lytudiep were being drawn together once again, slowly, inevitably, toward a reunion that would test the strength of their hearts and redefine everything they thought they had lost.
Some connections do not break when distance intervenes. They stretch, thin and aching, but they refuse to disappear. Fate had tightened its grip, and though CEO Toan and Lytudiep remained unaware of each other's whereabouts, their hearts had already begun to move in the same direction. Life on the farm taught Toan patience. He learned to wake before sunrise, to read the sky for signs of rain, to trust his hands even when his memories failed him. The rhythm was simple, honest, almost healing. Yet certain moments disrupted that peace. When he helped prepare meals, he felt a strange familiarity in the warmth of the kitchen. When he watched an elderly woman hum softly while working, his chest ached with a nostalgia he could not explain. It was as if fragments of another life brushed against him, then vanished. At night, sleep rarely came easily. In dreams, a woman stood just beyond his reach, her face blurred, her voice gentle but urgent, calling his name. He always woke with his heart racing, his fingers curling around empty air. Who was she? Why did her absence hurt more than any physical wound? Toan had no answers, only the quiet fear that something precious had been left behind. Elsewhere, Tu Diem felt the same unease, mirrored in her own routine. She walked familiar streets, greeted familiar faces, yet nothing felt complete. Each day she told herself to be realistic, to accept uncertainty, but acceptance was fragile. It shattered whenever she passed places they once shared, or when a sudden memory, his smile, his silence, his unwavering presence, caught her off guard. She began to notice signs in ordinary life, a stranger with a similar posture, a passing headline that made her pause. Even the changing seasons felt like messages, urging her not to give up. People around her spoke of coincidence, of moving on. She smiled, nodded, and continued to wait in her own quiet way. Fate, meanwhile, continued its careful work. Connections tightened invisibly. A police officer remembered a face he had seen long ago. A name resurfaced during an unplanned conversation. Each small event was insignificant alone, yet together they formed a chain that could no longer be ignored. In daily life, we often believe we are standing still, when in truth, we are being guided. The heart recognizes directions long before the mind catches up. Unaware of how close they truly were, Toan and Tu Diem moved through their days, pulled forward by something stronger than logic. Love, once awakened, had become a compass, silent, persistent, and impossible to silence. And with each passing moment, fate drew its threads tighter, preparing them for the moment when distance would finally lose its power. Sometimes fate does not arrive gently. It knocks, softly at first, then louder, more insistent, until the heart can no longer pretend not to hear. This was how change began for CEO Toan, in the most ordinary of moments, when he least expected it. One quiet afternoon, as clouds drifted lazily across the sky, Toan stood near the edge of the farm, watching workers load crates onto a truck. The sound of an engine starting sent a sharp echo through his chest. For a split second, his vision blurred. A different road, a different life. A woman waiting by the roadside, worry written across her eyes. The image vanished as quickly as it came, leaving him breathless and shaken. He studied himself, confused and unsettled. These moments were becoming more frequent, short flashes of something familiar, something deeply personal. A name hovered at the edge of his thoughts, refusing to take shape. He began to fear both possibilities, that he would remember everything or that he never would. Memory, he realized, was not just about the past. It was about responsibility, about love, about choices that could no longer be undone. At the same time, Tu Diem sensed a shift within herself. The waiting had changed. It no longer felt passive. She found herself asking questions she had avoided, reaching out to people she had once hesitated to bother. Hope, once quiet and fragile, now demanded action. Each conversation felt like stepping closer to the truth, or closer to heartbreak. Everyday life mirrored her emotions. Mornings felt heavier, afternoons stretched endlessly, and nights carried a strange anticipation. She listened more closely to passing stories, to half-remembered rumors. Somewhere, someone mentioned a man who had lost his memory, living far from the city. The detail lodged itself in her chest like a spark. Fate tightened its weave. The investigation quietly advanced. A photograph circulated again, this time reaching someone who paused longer than before. "He looks familiar," they murmured, unsure why their heart reacted before their mind did. One recognition led to another, and suddenly what once seemed impossible felt dangerously close. In our daily lives, we often fear the truth more than uncertainty. Truth forces us to face what we have lost and what we still want. Both Toan and Tu Diem stood at that threshold now, hearts unsteady, futures trembling. The distance between them was shrinking, not in miles but in moments. Memories were knocking, answers were stirring, and fate was preparing its final turn, one that would demand courage from them both and forever change the meaning of goodbye. There comes a moment when destiny no longer whispers. It stands still, looks you in the eyes, and asks whether you are brave enough to listen. The morning air was unusually calm when Toan felt it, an unexplainable pull tightening around his chest. The farm, once a place of refuge, suddenly felt too small for the storm rising inside him. He woke with the echo of a voice lingering in his mind, gentle yet firm, calling his name as if it had done so 1,000 times before. This time, the memory did not fade. It stayed. It waited. Meanwhile, Tu Diem stood at her window, watching sunlight spill across the street below. Ordinary people moved through their routines, buying breakfast, rushing to work, laughing over small things. Life went on, indifferent to the quiet miracle forming in her heart. She pressed her hand against her chest, feeling a strange certainty bloom there. Today would not be like the others. When the call finally came, it was brief and trembling with urgency. A lead, a name, a location. Tu Diem did not hesitate. She grabbed her coat, her hands shaking, not from fear, but from hope grown too powerful to contain.
Some part of her already knew the waiting was over. Their meeting was not dramatic at first. No sudden tears, no grand declarations, just two people standing face to face, suspended in silence. Toan studied her features, the way her eyes searched his, the familiar warmth in her presence. Then, like a dam breaking, memories rushed in, shared meals, quiet arguments, promises made under starlit skies. His knees weakened as the truth settled deep within him. Tu Diem, he whispered, his voice breaking on her name. That was all it took. The world seemed to pause, giving them space to breathe, to feel, to grieve what was lost and cherish what remained. Love, they realized, does not vanish with time or memory. It waits, it endures, it finds its way back. In everyday life, we often miss these moments when forgiveness becomes possible, when second chances appear disguised as coincidences. But fate had been patient with them, weaving its threads through strangers, kindness, and quiet perseverance. As they stood together, the future no longer felt frightening. It felt honest, fragile perhaps, but real. Whatever lay ahead would demand courage, healing, and trust. Yet for the first time in a long while, they were no longer walking alone. Under the open sky, fate finally spoke, not with promises, but with truth. Some hearts are meant to find their way back, no matter how far they wander.